The champagne was flowing, the crystal was clinking, and my boss, Julian Vance, was laughing like a man who had just gotten away with murder. He stood at the head of the mahogany conference table, his designer suit worth more than my annual salary, raising a glass to the record-breaking quarter we had just closed. He looked at me across the room and winked, a gesture that, to anyone else, looked like a mentor acknowledging his protégé. But I knew the truth. I knew that in exactly 12 minutes, the FBI would be walking through those double glass doors, and Julian had spent the last 48 hours planting a digital trail that led directly to my desk. He had stolen $10 million from the pension fund, and I was the designated ghost who was supposed to take the fall. He thought I was a loyal soldier who would go quietly into the night. What he didn't realize was that while he was busy deleting emails, I was busy hardwiring a voice-activated recorder into the ventilation shaft of his private office. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to broadcast his confession to every shareholder in the building. Julian Vance was about to find out that the person you underestimate is the one who eventually burns your empire to the ground. My name is Maya, and for 5 years, I was the heartbeat of Vance Global Logistics. I wasn't just Julian's executive assistant. I was his shadow. I knew his coffee order, his mistress's names, and the exact moment his voice shifted from business professional to predatory. I had worked 80-hour weeks, missed my sister's wedding, and sacrificed my personal life to build his dream, believing that loyalty in the corporate world was a currency that actually held value. I was wrong. In Julian's world, loyalty is just a tool you use until it loses its edge. The first sign of the betrayal came 3 days ago. I was working late, as usual, when I noticed a series of encrypted transfers originating from the Sterling account. It was a dormant pension fund for our long-haul drivers. $10 million had been moved in smaller, jagged increments over 48 hours. The destination: a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands called MV Logistics. MV Maya Vance. My heart had nearly stopped. Julian had set up the company in my name months ago, telling me it was part of a surprise incentive structure for my 5-year anniversary. I had signed the paperwork without looking, trusting him implicitly. I realized in that freezing, dark office that I wasn't being rewarded. I was being fitted for a straitjacket. I didn't panic. Panic is for people who have something to lose. I had already lost my trust. Now, I only had my survival. I spent the next 72 hours playing the role of the devoted, oblivious assistant. I brought Julian his green juice. I scheduled his flights. I smiled when he patted my shoulder and told me I was like family. But every time I left his office, I was gathering the shards of my own defense. I knew Julian's habits. Every afternoon at 4 p.m., he met with his CFO, Marcus, a man who was just as corrupt but twice as loud. They would sit in the war room, a glass-enclosed sanctuary they thought was soundproof. They talked about the Maya problem. They talked about how easy it would be to point the federal investigators toward my login credentials. They didn't know I had spent $2,000 of my own savings on a military-grade, long-range acoustic microphone. I didn't even need to be in the room. I just needed to be in the server closet next door. The day of the celebration arrived. The board was there. The investors were there. And Julian was at his peak, basking in the glory of his stolen wealth. He had even invited my parents, telling them he wanted them to see their daughter be honored. It was the ultimate cruelty. He wanted them to witness my arrest so it would look even more authentic to the press. As the clock ticked toward 4:15 p.m., the tension in my chest felt like a tightening wire. I stood by the buffet, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching Julian hold court. "To Maya," Julian announced, his voice carrying over the music. "The woman who makes all of this possible. Without her, well, let's just say Vance Global wouldn't be where it is today." The room erupted in applause. My mother beamed, wiping a tear from her eye. I looked at Julian and smiled. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, to look at the man who was trying to send me to prison for 20 years and show him nothing but gratitude. "Thank you, Julian," I said, my voice steady. "I've learned everything I know from you." That was when the heavy doors at the back of the room swung open. 4 men in dark windbreakers with FBI emblazoned in yellow across the back stepped in. The music cut out instantly. The silence was so thick you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Julian's performance was Oscar-worthy. He stepped forward, looking shocked and indignant. "Can I help you, gentlemen? We are in the middle of a private event." "We're looking for Maya Sterling," the lead agent said, his eyes scanning the room. Julian turned to me, his face a mask of tragic disappointment. "Maya, what is this about?" He looked at the agents. "Whatever you think she's done, I'm sure there's an explanation. She's my most trusted employee." I saw Marcus, the CFO, smirking in the corner. They thought it was over. They thought the trap had snapped shut. "I'd like to make a statement before you take me anywhere," I said, stepping toward the center of the room. "Maya, don't say anything without a lawyer," Julian said, his voice dripping with faux concern. He reached out to grab my arm, but I stepped back. "I don't need a lawyer, Julian. I have a recording," I said. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out a small, sleek remote. I tapped the button. Suddenly, the massive surround sound speakers in the ballroom, the ones that had been playing upbeat jazz seconds ago, crackled to life. It wasn't music. It was Julian's voice, clear and cold, recorded only 3 hours earlier in his private office. "The FBI will be here at 4:15. Make sure Maya's login is the one that authorized the final Cayman transfer. If she tries to deny it, we just point to the shell company we put in her name. She's too stupid to check the fine print anyway. By tonight, the sterling pension gap will be her problem, and we'll be 10 million richer. Who's going to believe an assistant over a CEO?" The room froze. I watched the blood drain from Julian's face until he was the color of sour milk. Marcus tried to bolt for the side exit, but an agent was already there, blocking his path. The recording continued. It went on to detail Julian's offshore accounts, his plans to dissolve the company after the scandal, and his laugh, that high-pitched, arrogant cackle, as he joked about how I would look in a jumpsuit. I looked at the FBI agents. "The digital keys to the Cayman accounts are currently being uploaded to your secure server as we speak. I redirected the final transfer an hour ago. The 10 million isn't in my name anymore. It's back in the driver's pension fund, with a digital breadcrumb trail that starts and ends at Julian's private terminal." Julian tried to speak, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. The board members, men and women who had stood by him for years, were now backing away from him as if he were radioactive. The lead agent walked over to Julian. "Julian Vance, you're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy." As the handcuffs clicked shut around Julian's wrists, the same wrists that were wearing a $50,000 watch, he finally met my eyes. The mask was gone. There was only raw, unfiltered hatred. "You're nothing," he hissed. "You're just a girl who handles my schedule." "I was the girl who handled your schedule," I corrected him, my voice echoing in the silent room. "Now, I'm the girl who's taking your chair. The board has an emergency clause for criminal displacement. Julian, check the fine print." I watched them lead him out in front of my parents, in front of the board, and in front of the employees he had tried to rob. My mother came over and hugged me, shaking, but I felt nothing but a cool, refreshing peace. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The board, desperate to save the company's stock price from a total nosedive, appointed me as the interim CEO during the restructuring. They needed someone the public could trust, the whistleblower who saved the pensions. Julian and Marcus are currently serving 15 years in a federal penitentiary. The MV Logistics shell company was dissolved, and every penny of the 10 million was returned to the drivers who had earned it. I still have the office at the top of the building, but the mahogany table is gone. I replaced it with a round one, so no one ever has to sit at the head again. I learned something during those 3 days of silence. I learned that the world is full of Julians, men who think that because they have the loud voices and the big titles, the people in the shadows don't matter. They forget that the shadows are where the truth lives. So, if you're ever in a position where you feel invisible, where you're being used as a pawn in someone else's game, don't panic. Just listen. Because the people who think they're the smartest in the room are usually the ones who talk too much. And in a world of noise, the person with the recorder is the one who eventually owns the song.